on your projects, I mean. Okay, so next up, we're going to actually talk about Maxwell materials. So I need every single one of you paying attention to this one, because this is your first introduction to like basically creating Maxwell materials. All right, so I'm going to try and keep it as sequestered into the lighting emitters category, but I might need to explain a lot of like high-level material stuff along with that. Let's see. So first things first, Rhino materials will always go the direction, like it'll shine the direction of the normal of the surface. Raise your hand if you know what a surface normal is. All right, cool. So a surface normal, basically, you guys are familiar with the Cartesian coordinate system, right? Raise your hand if you know what that is. You guys know what the X and Y axes are? That's the Cartesian coordinate system. Okay. So yeah, I'm bringing you guys back to like 8th grade. So anyway, yeah, you probably haven't even heard it called that since then. But so the Cartesian coordinate system works in all directions. And it also works like along like bent and warped surfaces as well. It just gets modified to be, instead of the X, Y, and Z axes, it's the U, V, and Z axes. Okay, so that's how it gets all warped and stuff. But anyway, a surface normal, if you look at like a warped plane, right? So that's horribly drawn. But a surface normal is going to have, like, these axes are going to warp along with this thing. And any one of these axes could have a point on it in space. So let's say this was the point. That has a U and V, but it also has a Z. And that Z goes out from the surface like that. So while your X, Y, and Z, right? You've got X, Y, and then your Z comes off the page like this, right? This has a positive and a negative, and this has a positive and a negative, right? That is not alien to you guys, right? Y'all remember that, more or less? The same thing works here. The Z-axis has a positive, and it also has a negative. Does that make sense? All right. So basically that axis exists on any one surface. So what we're looking at here is one of these surfaces of one of our lights. So if I click on this one right here, this little button that says Analyze Direction, click on that, and it's going to show you these directional arrows. That is the direction of the Z-axis. Therefore, or the normal. It's also called a normal. So let me write this up here. Okay, that is the normal. So those normals are pointing down. And that means the light will shine down. That's important. All right. Moving out of the realm of late 90s rock, let's get to, let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, materials. So this is also your first introduction into materials. So just kind of follow along with me, or if you don't have access to Rhino right now, just watch intently. But we're going to go to right-click in the materials panel, and you'll notice that it says New Material or New Emitter. Okay, don't be confused. Emitters are lights, and lights are not materials. Okay, they all get kind of dumped into the materials panel, but they are two separate things, and they have two separate sets of properties that we need to pay attention to. So click on New Emitter, and do me a favor and double-click that when it opens, or once you started it. So emitters are not materials, and therefore you can't really analyze the preview of an emitter in this kind of condition, because all it's showing you is, like when it's showing in the sphere, it's actually rendering what the material looks like. But if you looked at any of these fluorescent lights in this space without the diffusers on them, they would just look white, in theory, right? And that's how they get rendered. They're just white. Okay, so what you need to do is switch what the preview method is. And that was, yeah, right here. Yeah, we can pull that down. That's just notes. So what you need to do is all the way down here at the bottom, it says scene sampling level. You can change what scene the rendered material is showing up as. So what we're going to do is switch this to an emitter. And it says emitter 2 meter and emitter 10 meter. The 2 meter one it's basically going to show you what the light looks like across 6 feet of space. So let's go to that for now. And then click this little refresh preview. Okay, what you're going to notice is that it's not really showing you much. Go down to the emitter panel, and here we have all of the properties of this particular luminaire. Okay, it tells you what the watts are and what the efficacy is. What you need to know about watts and efficacy is that watts is how much light is being produced by that source, and efficacy is how well that light can penetrate that space. Does that make sense? Okay, that's how it behaves. That's not the technical definition, but that's how you should remember it when you're modifying it. So anyway, what we're going to do, because these lights are in a 12-foot tall space, they need to be amplified. And we also need them to penetrate the space quite a bit. So we're going to change the watts to something a little high, and higher than any normal light. So we're going to switch it to a 200-watt light. And also the efficacy, we're going to bump this up just because I always bump that up. Okay, and then hit refresh. Okay, you'll notice that the light actually looks like it's penetrating the space a bit more. Okay, so let's really bump it up and kind of look at the difference between the two. So let's go up to like 1,000 watts and hit refresh. Okay, so now you see that the light is kind of like burnt out in that particular location. And the efficacy is kind of allowing it to burn out here, but then it still fills the space with light. That's a fairly well-balanced light in a 2 meter calibration. But if we changed the efficacy to like 300, for instance, you're going to see that it's going to burn a lot more of that space. Okay, so this is a balancing game. What you need to know is that in reality, there's a lot more happening than what you're programming into your model. Okay, so in reality, you're shining these lights that have a certain wattage, 100, 150, whatever it is, and they're bouncing off of surfaces all over the place. So in theory, you may only have 1,000 watts of lighting in your space, in your real space, but in Rhino and Maxwell, there's a lot of information that you haven't programmed in that isn't allowing that light to really truly, fill out that space. So what I like to do is I bump up the wattage a little bit, and then I just balance it visually by using the Multilight settings that you're all familiar with now at this point. Okay, so I usually go pretty high, something like this. Efficacy, probably 150 I think will be fine for me in this one. Something like that. I might actually turn that down later, but yeah, let's go with that. So I'm going to call this emitter spot 8-inch. Oh, whoops, sorry, that was the wrong name. So we're going to go to emitter spot 8-inch, and then if you close that out, it shows up here. Okay. So without getting into too much detail about these lights, we're going to go the easy route. You have many different ways of applying the materials to surfaces, but what I would like you to do is select the can light layer, right click, oh, you have to select first. I thought you could apply by layer. Anyway, right click this and say select objects, then go here and say select to assign to selected. There you go. All right. So that applies that material, or not material, it applies that emitter to those discs. Okay. What questions do you have before we actually jump in and run like a test render? All right, let's do that then. Let me reset my camera. And I'm actually going to go a little higher now so you can see more of the lights. Something like that. And I'll go to render. Oh, double check and make sure that you've got it on production and intensity. And then I'm going to do my test render. Oh, shoot. Hang on. I want to get rid of this. Okay, so I'm going to let this run for a little bit, and I'm going to pause the video, and I'll come back to it in just a moment. All right, guys. So let's kind of like chat over this thing real quick. So what we've got is a model that I think has progressed quite a bit in terms of its believability and just general quality. It's taken us 2 hours of class to get there with all of our waiting and drafting and stuff and just talking things over. But you guys, when you sit down to do this level of development really should only take you about 20 minutes. So maybe not even that. 10 minutes once you get good at it and you know what you're doing. So the point I'm trying to stress is the finer details of things, and it didn't really come through unless we wanted to render it a bit more, but like there's this tiny little edge on here that just gives it packs. It's a tiny little thing, but it packs so much punch in a good rendering. Let me try and maybe pull up some examples. Like you guys can just Google things and probably find good renderings and bad renderings and know what to do and what not to do. So I'm trying to stay away from like photoreal stuff. Trying to look at something that's a little more academic, maybe. Well, that didn't change much. These are all too good. Hang on. There we go, stuff like this. Let's go interior. So you'll see all I'm finding are the good ones. This is not how I expected this to go. All right. Anyway, so something like this, like it's lacking a little bit of detail. It doesn't. You see the surfaces, but you don't really see like the reveals on the surface, right? Like here, it's just a flat wall. This here, this here, and that up there. It's a flat wall. There aren't any reveals. You can't really see that it's an actual material. It just looks like drywall that somebody painted on. Where in reality, it's probably a panelized material with some like gap reveals with like metal trims and stuff like that. So that's the kind of small detail that turns this from a cartoon into a rendering. Does that make sense? Okay. And then something like this. Well, maybe that's just a bad quality image, but having a little rim around the edge of the frame of that light would actually, give it a lot of believability. Yeah. Okay. So this one, actually, I kind of like this rendering to show as an example because it's almost there. The materials are actually quite nice, and actually the lighting is quite good. But the lack of belief that I have in it, the reason I get pulled out of this environment and I can't quite feel like it's real, is how can I zoom in on this thing? Can't. Well, anyway, it's right here. Okay, right there and right here, and it's a small little thing, but all it's going to take is a little 1" by 1" track that connects this thing at the top and bottom. Something that holds that into place so it's not just a piece of glass that sits in that space. It's floating. It doesn't have any structure. There's no hardware. So that is the perfect example of the level of detail that you should model to, and you don't have to do that everywhere. You just have to do it on particular things that pack a lot of punch. And I think lighting is one of them. Okay. So anyway, so that's the discussion. I think it's kind of a long video we're getting to now, but you know, to sum everything up, we went from this to this in a relatively short period of time, and you can tell the lighting is, you know, fairly well balanced. We got to work on the fake natural light on the outside, but you know. So going forward, I think next week we're going to start to look at like focus lighting and stuff like that, and we're going to actually drop some material and how to bounce light around the space, making some reflections in order to get this space really you know, built out. But what I need from you guys is to lock in, and I'm going to come around and just visit with each one of you here for the remainder of class, just to check out what scene you've set up. And you know, if you've been working on modeling to catch up with me here today, I'll check that out as well. But I need to see what scene you have set up. And what I want you guys to do is to design. If you needed to do any further work on the floor, do some work on the floor, but design what you're doing in the ceiling. Okay, it doesn't have to be just spots like me. I went super simple because I'm up here doing it on the spot. But you guys should think through, does it need to be, you know, like spotlights or linear lights or cove lights, that kind of stuff, because I'm going to introduce other types of lights next week. Okay, any other questions about this? Okay, great. So yeah, we're going to keep moving forward. We're going into work mode, and I'm going to visit with each one of you and check out what you've got.